Five-1, welcome to another episode of the Five-1 Speedway show. Hopefully you've managed to catch up with all the other episodes so far. They've all been very interesting and very, very colourful and everything else. All the guests we've had have loved it, and the response from you guys who have watched it, both have told me either in person or via any other way necessary. It's been really, really great to hear. We've got more in the pipeline after this one, but tonight I'm very, very happy to have this guy on the show. He is an England legend, former England captain. He's synonymous with Ipswich, both as a rider and promoter now, and team manager as well. I mustn't forget that one out either. But please welcome to the show, Chris Louis.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, mate. Yourself?
Good, yeah. That team manager bit was very short.
Yeah. I don't know how long it was for, but I know I did read
half a season. I sacked myself.
Yeah, that's a new one, isn't it? Sacking yourself.
Yeah, I brought myself into the boardroom and said, "Nah, got to go. You're not doing it."
No. Yeah, that's been a very interesting meeting. But so how's the 2020 pandemic year been for yourself?
Oh, brilliant. Loved every minute of it. Tough like it has been for everybody, I think. Just the lack of social interaction, I think, is the same for everybody, is driving me mad. Obviously it all kind of kicked off in general in March, and I think I probably wasn't alone in thinking, end of April, worst case scenario, May, and we'll all be back on track. And here we are heading for a season start in May, still not 100% sure what we're going to see when we get there.
No, but the main thing is, though, as long as you're healthy, mate, and all the family and everything's all healthy, that's the 100% important thing. Yeah,
we've been very lucky, as a family and friends, not too much impacted in that way by the pandemic. So yeah, it's good. It's just I've got a lot of friends who are business people, and I've seen them suffering as far as their businesses go and stuff. So it's not been easy. It's affected everybody in one way or another, but thankfully there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we push on.
Yeah, and fingers crossed that we can get a season of some sort underway this year, whether it's May or even maybe pushing June, depending on government guidelines, council guidelines, and every other guideline you can think of, I think, for stadiums.
Yeah, there's so much involved. Obviously, with most of the clubs, they don't own their stadiums, so they're to a degree in the hands of what their landlords want to do. But we're very confident that May will see us start our season on time. And I don't even feel that there's going to be too many restrictions that are going to be a problem for Speedway. If we filled our stadiums every week, of course that would be. But unfortunately, right now we don't. So I think we'll be able to live with any restrictions that might be about in May. And just looking forward to it. A whole year without any Speedway action it's been frustrating for me. But if I'd have been riding now, I think I'd have been pulling my hair out completely. I'd have been riding around the garden, I think.
Yeah, like most of the other boys would have done, we've been around the garden. But fortunately, some of the English boys managed to get out to Poland and Europe, and some of the younger guys like Tom, Drew, Jason Edwards, and Anders Rowe, people like that managed to get out and get a skid on it. It must be good for yourself to see these young Brits getting an opportunity out there.
Yeah, fortunately you're right, for those younger guys, they were the ones that got the most out of 2020. It wasn't anywhere near as much as they would have done or would have liked to have done. But the young guys in particular, I thought did really well. And Drew had so much to look forward to. Obviously signed on for the Witches for 2020. Didn't get to race for us. So I was pleased to see the progress he made in so few meetings. He got involved with Team GB at the top end in their elite squad and went to all the training sessions and stuff, and he learned a lot through them, and you could really see the impact it had on his racing, particularly in the British final when we saw him there.
Yeah, and also when he did well in the under-21s and things like that as well at Berwick and things like that. But obviously Ipswich came close to that stage in the meeting last year, but unfortunately the weather, being the British weather that it was, wouldn't let you put the British final on, which was unfortunate.
Yeah, the pandemic wasn't enough, so it threw a bit of rain at us as well. That was a really tough time. There was so much work involved. I think I put together about 120-page document to satisfy the local authorities that we could, make the stadium as COVID secure as possible and put the meeting on as they wanted it. And I got a lot of help from them, to be fair. The local authorities, government in particular, but also locally, they take a lot of stick. But they were walking me through it. Although yes, it was a lot of work. They were quite helpful. So yeah, in the end, what was supposed to be, I think, 2,300 people capacity when we set off to organise the British final, soon went down to 1,000, restricted because of the situation at the time. And then, of course, I don't know what it was, maybe 5 days before the event was supposed to take place, we were no crowd at all. So the decision was made to run it anyway behind closed doors. So we continued all the workload. We had the practice at Vauxhall. And then, as you say, the weather decided to play its little part. So in the end, it was the right decision to send it to Manchester. They were the only other club really feasible in a position to run it, having done their own behind closed doors event. So they were in a position ready to go. The live streaming had already been set up there, so they knew exactly what they were doing. And as it turned out, the weather we had in Ipswich the day before and the day, the track wasn't going to be in a fit state. So okay, it rained quite badly in Bellevue, and we had a wet track there. But I still think, even given their conditions, it was better than we would have had at Vauxhall if we'd have had a mean at all.
Yeah, cause I think with Bellevue being so much like a bowl and a circle, and the water can just run off the track a bit more than what it can do at Vauxhall, unfortunately, because unfortunately Vauxhall's fairly flat, and things like that. But talking of Vauxhall and everything, all the work that you've managed to do over the last few years has managed to bring some great racing back to the track and everything. Because obviously, I remember when it was the old shape when you were riding, quite narrow, quite tight. But obviously, the changes that you've made in the recent years have brought some great racing back when I've been there to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have been better than it has, to be honest. I mean, I think it has made it a more enjoyable track for most riders, and I think the racing has improved. So, all in all, I'm very happy with it, and I think it's made it a little safer too with the extra room that everyone's got. So, yeah, it's good. I mean, if I had the time again to make the changes, and of course it's not to say that at some point I won't make some more, but eventually you have to let it settle down, and you have to let a home side or your mainstay of a home side get their advantage out of it. So that's where we're at the moment. But yeah, I mean, it's not, talking about the weather and the British final in particular, it's not so much the lack of banking, because it's actually got quite a bit of banking, and it does drain quite well, but it's got obviously a high clay content, the material that we use. So it doesn't necessarily handle the weather as good as some surfaces, and that late on in the year it wasn't drying, the sun wasn't out to dry it. So there was a lot of things against it, and Bellevue just being a bigger, wider, more flowing track, it's easier to ride in tricky conditions as well.
Yeah, very much so. Very much like the old days of Bradford when it was raining and things like that. So the fun times.
Not as good as Bradford.
Oh, no, not as good as Bradford.
Having said that, I haven't ridden Bellevue, and I'm sure it is fantastic. I love watching the Speedway there. It's very good. So I certainly you won't get me knocking it, but Bradford was just special.
Well, it still could be special if it comes back, and it's getting closer.
Yeah, I mean, the shale I've noticed the last couple of days has started to go down. He's got big plans for the stock cars there, and fair play to him. He's done a good job to get it off the ground. I'm not sure we'll see Speedway. I mean, I'd love to see Speedway there. It would be brilliant venue to bring back. But there are issues in terms of getting the safety fence right. They've built that hospitality area and offices area down on what was the Speedway's third and fourth turns, and it would make it very costly and difficult to come up with an ultimately safe way of protecting that area, really.
Yeah, because I've had Gary Havelock on the show before, and he said about it because he's been there and seen it, and apparently the hospitality suites goes over the third and fourth bend ever so slightly. So yeah, like I say, it could be a safety concern, but then I'm sure they might be able to find a way around it to work it out. But obviously, it's different to when Bradford last ran, because now we have the air fences and things like that now. So obviously, that's going to narrow the corners up a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know what the situation is with the rugby pitch, because when they were last using it to race on, every meeting they had to take the rugby pitch up and they, sort of re-prepare the Speedway track. And it was a lot of work and a lot of expense, partly to blame for the running costs and the fact that they ended up quitting. But yeah, I don't know. I'd love to see it come back. I mean, for me, in the first few times I went, I have to admit it was a difficult place for me. I really struggled with just the whole technique, the banking, the speed of it, and on some occasions the grip. The stones were sort of, they felt like they were about an inch diameter when they were hitting 100 mile an hour. I used to come home from there pretty well battered and bruised without even crashing. But in the end, I got to grips with it, thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was really good fun.
Yeah, because obviously towards the end, obviously you had the British Grand Prix there, which you competed in, and many other Elite League Riders Championships, things like that there. So yeah, the venue and everything's fantastic. So I say fingers crossed, but you never know. We shall hopefully see some bikes maybe back there one day. But while we're here to talk about your glorious career as a Speedway rider. Obviously, like I said, you're mostly associated with Ipswich just a little bit. You spent a few years there, but
Just a few.
but how did you sort of get started? Obviously, everyone knows that your dad rode and everything, but was there any other influence into you starting riding Speedway?
Not really. Seems like an awful long while ago now, though. No, I mean, the influence was obviously my dad, because I used to travel around and watching him race. It was a Speedway life that we had, so that was the reason I got involved, obviously. But I was happy racing grass track, and then I went on. I think when I was 13 to motocross. Had a lot of fun with motocross. Got a fairly serious knee ligament injury, which was giving me a lot of problems to carry on. Done a couple of years of adults, and then I guess I must have been 17 when I first had a go on a Speedway bike, sort of on a 500. I borrowed a van. I stole my dad's Westlake that was still in the garage. He didn't know about me borrowing it. I worked out I had to charge the box up. I kind of knew about that, the ignition box. Took a mate down to Hackney and had a go and had a whale of a time.
And never looked back after that then, really?
Oh, not really, no. I know that I put it back in the shed dirty, and my dad, it was about 2 days before he went back in the garage and realised his bike was dirty and came rushing back in the house. I said, how the hell has my bike got dirty? What have you been doing? Dave Pavitt managed to keep that one quiet because he was there that day as well. So it was a bit of a shock to him. But I think I had 3 practice sessions, and then I was out for my first ride in the team for Hackney that year.
Yeah, because that was 88 when you joined Hackney with Mark, Alan Morgaridge, who was it, Andy Gelvin was in the team and people like that. So yeah, I know you've done the League and Cup double in your first year, which must have been a huge eye opener for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was a team that was just enjoying life. There was. It's not fair to say we weren't professional, because we were. We were all wanted to win, and we realised early on that we had a good chance with the team that we had. But predominantly, I've got to say that team was just about fun. Right down to the very much older, more experienced guys like Tomo, who was probably the worst one of the lot. I remember some of the northern and southern tours that we were on. It all got quite out of hand, but we were of the age, I guess, where we could pull it back together the next day and still perform very well. It wasn't ultimately the most professional team I rode in, but it was probably the most successful, other than 98 Ipswich at a higher level, obviously. But boy, did we enjoy it, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine so. A laugh a minute almost, because obviously, like you say, you got the characters, and obviously these are maybe the influences on yourself and Mark at the young ages that you were. Obviously, they probably weren't the greatest influences in the end, but still, you had a great time along the way.
Yeah, they taught us well. I think we were getting blamed for a lot of the antics by the end of the season. We kind of took over, but yeah, I mean, it was just great fun. I mean, it was a whirlwind sort of couple of years for me, because I went through 87 getting my international rally license, and then for me 88 started with the Dakar Rally, which I did, which was an unbelievable experience. At the time I was the youngest competitor to have done it, and then literally getting back a month back on the Speedway bike and racing again. So 87, 88 was a big change in life and what I was up to.
Yeah, I never knew that. Never knew you did the old Dakar or anything like that. So that's an interesting one.
No, it was great. It was the 10th Dakar. It was notoriously the hardest one, and it was tough. But just getting ready for it, qualifying for an international rally license, you had to do at least 6 domestic rallies. I think we ended up doing 7 because we broke down or crashed out. I don't know which it was. Can't remember in one of them. But yeah, doing the Dakar itself was a fantastic experience. I must admit, me and Dick Partridge, who I did it with, we've kind of toyed with the idea 30 odd years on of doing it again in the last couple of years, but time and budget seem to have gone against us on that one.
Yeah, the world's slightly changed since that sort of time, unfortunately. But from your first year, I do have a bit of footage from you riding. It's in the test match when it was the National League versus Sweden. I've got here. This is when you had the reserve ride at Wimbledon, your first ride. There's you
Okay,
coming off of
geez.
gate number 4.
I don't even remember this.
Well, you wouldn't done because the Swedes wiped the floor of the National League that year. Unfortunately, the test
Is it
series.
black and white?
No, not quite, not quite. It's a grainy colour. It's a grainy colour. But you're coming off gate number 4 here, and obviously, say it's your first season. I mean, what sort of like? Do you remember these sort of like test matches in the early days? And
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed them. I mean, they were massive for me. I mean, anytime, particularly in the early days, obviously when you're starting out and you're a youngster, but every time I pulled on an England or Team GB race jacket was an honour for me, and it gave me a buzz. I mean, just being introduced to the crowd before the meeting, you know, it was everything to me. Just so proud to wear the race jacket and do my best for my country. It was fabulous. So it most of the time, I think it, you know, brought out the best in me. Really, certainly, never gave less than 100%.
yeah, I can imagine so. And this one here, you're leading Tony Olsen. Of course, Tony was in the British League at this time, and you're still in the National League. And you're pretty much put up a really good fight in this one.
Yeah, I look like I'm holding him up a bit, but
Yeah.
so as long as you get to the checkered flag in front,
Yeah,
that's what counts.
Yeah. But no, I just thought I'd show you that because obviously, again, that's from your first year and things like that. So it's kind of just cool just to look back and say, oh well, you know, I kind of remember that.
I haven't seen any of that stuff for many years. So I'm not very good. I'm not particularly nostalgic. That was fun to watch, but you know, people say, oh, you must have kept certain bikes and or a bike at least, and I haven't got anything. You know, I have got race jackets, I have got race suits and stuff like that, but other than that, and obviously trophies and stuff. But no, I'm not one for collecting things.
Ah, fair enough. Well, that's opposite to me. I like collecting them and everything. So, but obviously after '88, the glorious year of '88, you moved on to Ipswich in '89 with, I think it was like pretty much the whole Hackney promotion moved over to Ipswich, I think, that year as well, because your dad, I think, was promoted there as well, and obviously Mark went there, Alan went there, and people like that went.
Yeah, there was a lot of people involved at Hackney that were sort of more. They were directors of the company and stuff, and they did run Hackney Speedway, but you know they didn't move to Ipswich. There was more people involved in Hackney than sort of people really realised. But yeah, Dave Pavitt, Dad, and Mike West came over to Ipswich and started that. Quite a bit of pressure coming. It was only my second year riding. I'd done a couple of meetings as guest bookings in the British League at Ipswich. One for Wolverhampton, and I think maybe one for Ipswich actually. But then coming back the following year, albeit, you know, dropping the club down a division into what was then the National League, coming out, rolling out as number one for your hometown club in second year was quite a bit of pressure, but you know, I enjoyed it. It was good.
Yeah, and that's pretty much where you stayed for most of your career, was at number one for Ipswich, you know, at National League and at British League level. So that must have been pretty cool to keep that basically number one enough the whole rest of your career.
Yeah, I really, for some reason, I just enjoyed number one. I mean, I know when I went to Hackney the first year and I went up to number two after the first set of green sheets, I think I just, you know, to pretty much start at number two after the first month, I just got so used to heat number one that whenever, you know, certainly the latter years when I was not highest average rider and I moved down to number three or number four or whatever, I really didn't like not going out in heat one. It's, you know, the track's all good in heat one and you haven't got to stand there watching races. You just straight into the action, straight out. And I think I just got used to that from pretty much the off. So it's where I preferred to be, really.
Yeah, get heat one out of the way, you know, the pressure race, you know, everyone's looking at you thinking Chris can go out and win that one, then runs a second.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, well, I did my best. They soon let you know when you were letting them down, especially in heat number one.
Yeah, I can imagine so. But then, obviously, in those first few years of riding at Ipswich, so you had some right characters even in the team then. And I think you came close to maybe a couple of years in the National League to win the league again. And then obviously you went up to the British League. Did you go up in 91? Was it you went up, or was it 1990 you went up?
I think it was 91. We done 89 and 90, continued in the National League, and then we went up to the, I don't even know what it was called then. I guess it was the Elite League by then.
It would be the British League. It would be the British League still, because I think it was like the Home Fire League, Division 1, British League thingy, whatever you want to call it. So it's
still British League. Geez, am I that old?
It was like the Home Fire League then, maybe Division 1. And
oh, okay,
Division
right.
2.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I do remember that.
Yeah, because I think that's the same time that Wimbledon went up to the British League as well with you guys from the National League as well. Unfortunately, Wimbledon didn't see out the season; they finished up down at Eastbourne. But yeah, I mean, it must have been a huge jump for yourself. Again, still early on in your career to go up to the British League.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was just dead keen to get to the top as fast as I could, and it's where I wanted to be. I was watching the guys, obviously, locally, like Jeremy. I was obviously, he'd gone to Reading at that point, but and then there was people like Ericsson and Hans Nielsen and the Americans over at Cradley, Hamill, Hancock, those guys. That's they're the guys I wanted to be racing against. So I just couldn't wait to move as quickly as possible. And I think maybe it had a little bit of a bearing in Dad's thinking with the club at the end of 90. I decided to say, look, I need to move on. I want to move as quickly as possible. He wasn't prepared to hold me back. Equally, didn't really want to lose me to my hometown club and the family business. So, he sort of said, right, okay, well, we'll have to look at making the move then. So one or two inspired signings, people like Tony Rickardson in those early days. So that wasn't a bad signing at the time.
Who's he then? Never heard of that bloke.
He did all right. He's finished now, but he didn't have a go at it.
Yeah. But also you had the likes, I think, was like Mitch Shearer as well, and then around that sort of time was in the team as well and things like that. So you had a good, like, strong little nucleus of riders at that time.
Now there's a character,
yeah.
Young Mitch. Yeah, had some great times with him. Fiery little man for someone who's about 5 foot tall, but good, 2 foot taller than Mitch. And Phil came over into the pits at Reading, and Mitch was knelt down by his clutch doing something. And Phil just leant over his bike to apologise for something he'd done in the race. And as Mitch looked up, he just gave him the biggest uppercut you've ever seen. And Phil just went straight over backwards and just landed flat on his back, which was just hilarious that Mitch had managed to knock him out. If they'd both been stood up, he wouldn't have been able to reach him anyway.
Would have had to stand on the toolbox to try and reach him.
He would have done, yeah.
No, that's brilliant. I like that. Because obviously then, in that time, you became World and 21 champion as well. Must have been a huge thing for yourself, Obviously, I think, was it even Russia you won it, or close to there you won it?
Yeah, I'd had a run in Italy in Loniga with at Hamburg, and I lost that. And that was so frustrating because I'd set out to win that. It was a competition, under 21 World Champion. It's what I wanted to be. I've got a time scale on that. So I was a relative late starter to Speedway, being 18, 19 when I started. So, I was devastated to lose that runoff in Italy. So, we went to Lvov the next year. It went through all the qualifying routes and managed to get to the final again. It was a big track. It cut up a bit. It rained all eating. Track got pretty wet, but I was just going. And it was a tough lineup. I think Tony finished on that rostrum with Rennie Ass, I think, and Lars Gunnerstadt was up there. So it was, in those days, the under 21s were tough lineups.
Yeah, they were. I mean, I can't remember who was in the field, but I'm sure it was a really, really tough field. And of course, then later on, you faced all these boys in the Polish, Swedish, British leagues later on in your career. So again, you guys all just basically grew up together, knocking lumps out of each other, really.
Yeah, we did. I wouldn't say necessarily knocking lumps out of each other. We were gentle guys in days. I don't think we were quite as hard on each other as they can be today. Not sure that's all down to the guys. Some of it is just how you have to ride the bikes these days. There's nothing but flat out most times. So, but yeah, we certainly enjoyed racing against each other. There's a lot of respect in those days for each other. And, right from the beginning, when I started, it was the first year as well for Todd Wiltshire at Wimbledon. And so we those ranks together. So, when Todd was out there, back in the bars in the World Finals and stuff, it was great for me to see, albeit I would have rather it was me at the time.
Oh yeah, I can imagine you would happily swap places with him, but it didn't happen. But obviously during that time, you can say it's still at Ipswich and everything. The club was doing well, having steady times and everything. But for you on the individual front, you managed to reach the world final in '93 at Pocking, and then obviously again you managed to make the last world final in '94. So what are your two memories of that? Because obviously '93 you managed to finish third in the world, equal with your dad. So it must have been pretty chuffing for yourself when you've done that, even though you had a run off with Hans Nielsen for second.
Yeah, I think when you get to that point, if you're not going to stand on the top step, it's kind of neither here nor there. I mean, that's no excuse. Hans was a hero of mine at the time that I looked up to. Less so when he was running me wide in Grand Prix and things, but yeah, it was a fantastic day. I was still. I mean, I was only 4 years in at the time, so it was a big thing for me to be there that day. And Nicky Lanham was my mechanic, Lee's older brother. We were both just a couple of kids really in the pits there, wondering what on earth we were doing there, looking around at all these heroes. So to having a run off for second place was really quite something and good fun.
Yeah, I can imagine it was just like a huge eye opener. That's where you think, well, maybe I can go second or first next time. You think that you can bet yourself, and after that.
Yeah, I think it did bring me on as far as confidence goes. To actually get there was tough. I think I had a run off in the last round, which was, I don't know what it was, Intercontinental or whatever it was in them days in Vetlanda in Sweden, and I think it must have been on about 7 or 8 points. So I'd kind of muddled my way through that meeting and still wasn't there. Needed a 4-man runoff, I think it was, with people like Peter Carlson and Per Jonsson, I think, and I'd kind of lost my way through the meeting and got sort of slower and slower as the meeting had gone on. And I know my dad was there, but he wasn't in the pits with us. He'd kind of decided to let us get on with it, and he just came down literally a couple of minutes before the runoff and said, "Right, this is what you need to do." And they were pretty radical adjustments. It was quite radical settings with carburation, and it was like 2 teeth off the back and stuff that you wouldn't just suddenly do before the biggest runoff of your life. And I looked at my mechanic, Nigel. Nigel just said, "Yep, think he's right." So I said, "Oh, I'll get on with it then, and I'll do my best." And went out and won the runoff. So, it was that close, not getting there at all. So then to finish third was just the icing on the cake, really.
Yeah, and obviously topped off a good personal year for yourself then, really. And then obviously on to '94, again, qualifying for what would be the last world final. What was your sort of memories of that final then? Was it a bit of an emotional night, or was it just like another meeting for yourself?
Yeah, it wasn't a great in that one. For Voyens was hot and cold for me. Sometimes I did all right, sometimes I didn't. I think Voyens is that kind of track. But yeah, I went with a lay-down GM, which I think there was probably only 2 other laydowns in the pits, both Jowers with Hans and Mark at the time. And I didn't use it. I rode it in practice, said, "Oh, I don't know. I don't really understand the bike with the gearing and everything. We had to do completely differently. We hadn't got enough experience of it." So I stuck with the upright. Had a pretty poor meeting. I think I jumped on the laydown for my last ride and won it. So I sort of left thinking, picked the wrong bike, obviously. But, that's how it goes.
Yeah, because unfortunately, I say you're like most of the other guys I've chatted to on here. You're in between the lay down and the uprights, that sort of time, the transaction. And unfortunately, with the British League not allowing it till '96 to try to use the lay downs, you guys were behind the field in that, especially in the new Grand Prix. But what was your sort of personal take on the new lay downs at the time?
They were a lot of hard work. The biggest factor was carburation. No one had got a good carburetor working consistently well. So we were constantly playing about with carburetors. They were coming over from Germany almost on a weekly basis. Someone would say, "Try this, try this, try this." So yeah, we were all over the place. The BZ came along, which sort of calmed things down a little bit, and they tended to operate pretty well most of the time. And then other carburetors came along and to where we are today. But went to Germany for an open meeting in, where was it? Augusta, I think it was. And we put a Wal Phillips. I mean, he's a guy that was inventing Speedway stuff in the 50s.
Yeah.
And we won a so-called fuel injectors on it just to try it. They weren't fuel injection, they were gravity fed. There was no pump or anything. we put one of them on, and funny enough, Jeremy Doncaster used to use them on his grass track bikes on his toque. And the bizarre thing was, before the meeting, we had it all covered up, so you couldn't see anything above the engine, like where the carburetor should have been. And he sat on my bike and he twisted the throttle, and he put his head up, looked at me, and he said, "That's a Walt Phillips," just by twisting the throttle. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, "It is." And it worked really well that day, but then it just played up time and time again after that. So we threw that idea away as well. So yeah, it was just the development of them was a lot of money, blood, sweat, tears, heartache most of the time, and blew a few up. But once they settled down, they were absolutely fine. I can remember you say they came in 96, 95. We were allowed to test them at Kings Lynn in a match against Australia, and I was the only one that turned up with one. Although we'd all been contacted, both Australia and England, and said, "Look, if you've got a lay down and you want to bring it, we're thinking about using them next year in the British League. So you can ride them in this meeting if you want." I was the only one that turned up with one. So my first ride, I think I knocked nearly a second off Hans Nielsen's track record that had been there for about 10 years. And I was as white as a ghost because I hardly skidded the thing. It was just like road racing around the corners. And I remember coming in and my mechanic looking at me saying, "Are you all right?"
Come off the bike shaking.
I think so. And that was it. Yeah, they came in the next year. So, it wasn't a mistake. I know there's always the argument, uprights, lay downs, and what was best. It's what's different. I think the biggest problem with lay downs that they are today is ever since the development of engines with the silencers in 2010, that's when they went from something that was quite usable to something that's just flat out now.
Yeah, because I think, like you say, the silencers were a big thing, but also, like you say, technology moved on. Engines, inside the engine, it's all changed. I'm sure if you look at an engine parts, what they have now compared to what you had in those early days lay down, it's all completely different, and setups are completely different now to what they were.
Yeah, I think the setups are different. A lot of the parts evolved over sort of my time. Technology in terms of materials and design has got better, so they're more reliable now. But it's just the characteristics are different. They rev harder and they need to be revving to work properly. The few sort of goes I've had after meetings in the last, I haven't now ridden one for about 4 or 5 years, but prior to that, every time I had a go, they just scared me. You couldn't ride them old school. You just had to ride them flat out.
Yeah, unfortunately, the throttle doesn't work both ways nowadays. It only works one way. Like you say, it's flat out.
Yeah,
but
flat out.
Yeah, literally. But I managed to ride one of the GTRs when they first sort of came out, and they sort of gave you that little bit more of an on-off sort of switch you could have. Whereas, obviously, like you say, nowadays the GMs or the JLs, you are flat out wherever you go, and they're mainly probably designed just to ride the big tracks. Obviously, you take them to someone like Ipswich or Eastbourne or something like that, where it's tight and technical, where you've got to use the throttle both ways. Sometimes it doesn't always work, and of course, track conditions catch people out and everything else. So, unfortunately, it's gone that way. But maybe something could come along and calm them down a bit.
Yeah, I still feel that, the entertainment factor would be better if we calm the bikes down a little bit. And it doesn't necessarily mean taking power away. A lot of the time over the years when people have said, we need to make changes, they've put restrictions in and they've done certain things that have lost a certain amount of power. And that's okay, depending on where you lose it, but it can make them harder to ride just by taking power away. So, I don't think that's necessarily needed to take power away. You just need to change the power, make them more rideable, really. And I hope that over the coming years we can develop something like that, because I think it would help the sport no end. I think it would make it safer, and I think it would make it more entertaining.
Yeah, because everyone likes to see close racing and things like that. Because obviously, you talk about reducing power. In '96, they decided to bring in these solid block tyres, which were like running slicks, very much just try and cover the bikes down, which I think was another Ollie Olsen invention at the time. How did you find riding those sort of tyres? Are they awful to ride?
Yeah, I was there that day, and I think it was a Grand Prix in Pocking when we were supposed to be using them, and the riders, we done practice, and then a few of the lads came out for their last practice sessions with the normal tyres, and Ollie Olsen, race director at the time, was trying to stop people going out with them and why they were going out with them, because that wasn't the tyre. They couldn't race with those tyres. And we all just got together and said, well, Ollie, actually we are racing with those tyres because we are not using those solid block tyres. You can forget about them. And I think that was the end of them that day.
Yeah, I think they used them in a couple of other FI meets. I think a Grand Prix Challenge for that year in Prague they used it because that's when Wiggy won it, and things like that. But how did you find those early sort of days in the Grand Prix series? Was it a bit of a culture shock then, just to, instead of having one off world final to then having it on basically 6 nights?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I only done 2 one-off world finals. It was a long road to get to a world final. That was the big thing in them days, really. They were quite tough to get into. But yeah, of course, the Grand Prix, I think when it started, it was 6 rounds and then it grew. And it was different. I enjoyed it. People have said to me, you know, oh, well, what's the best world championship, best style of world championship? And it's just different. I think the Grand Prix is a fair world championship because you get different tracks, different days. You've got to be consistent. I mean, it's true when Mark won the world title, didn't win a round, but you know, undoubtedly over the series, he was the best rider. And so I think in that respect, the Grand Prix is good. What you can't beat is waking up one morning knowing that if you can put 5 rides together, you could be world champion. That was a special feeling, which obviously I only experienced a couple of times. Would have liked to have done more, but yeah, they were special days, those one-offs.
Yeah, I can imagine they were. Like I said, built up to that one big day. I mean, you had it nearly technically 3 times. You had the 121s and the 2 senior world finals you had. So you had the best of sort of like the juniors and the seniors, really. But obviously in 95, you came close to again to get into 3rd. Unfortunately, a bad last round at Hackney kind of cost you of getting the top 3 place.
Yeah, Hackney, the new Hackney, that was a one-off, thank God. Yeah, they got that totally wrong. The track was awful. I mean, it was particularly bad that day. It was the same for everybody. I'm certainly not using it as an excuse. It rained, I think, all meeting as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just had an absolute nightmare. I didn't get my head around it. Only myself to blame. So yeah, that was a shame. Could have been on the rostrum again. Would have been nice. I think that was when a young Jason Crump starred that night. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think it was also the night that a young Thomas Golub got flattened.
Yeah, it was by a certain Mr. Boyce.
I think everybody remembers that meeting for that one.
yeah, but that was a wet night at Hackney, you know, and things like that. But you know, for a track in London, especially in the mid-90s, that was good for Speedway. Unfortunately, again, didn't last, but still, it was still good to be back in the capital then.
Yeah, I just think because I rode for the original Hackney, the original track. It just felt like it was just flat. You know, there was even the new terracing was all behind glass. The track was just flat, long, narrow. There was nothing about it to excite you, which is why it only lasted a couple of years. And such a shame because the old Hackney was old school. It was, you know, EastEnders on the terraces, you know, it was just good fun. You know, the fans we had were unbelievable, and the track was great. It was you know, better proportioned, wider, banked, and it was always well prepared. So it was a shame that they got that wrong, because if they'd have got it right, who knows, it could even still be there. I doubt it once the Olympics came along. You don't know.
We could have had a few more years there, but you know, it's unfortunately didn't happen. But then, of course, the Grand Prix went back there in '96, and of course, the London Lions were there for that season. So at least you had a meeting or 2 on it prior to a Grand Prix, rather than having a practice on it like you did the previous year.
Yeah, I don't think it helped much, though. I think I was still rubbish.
I think you had a better meeting, but yeah, probably still rubbish. But you know,
yeah, wasn't my favourite that new track.
No, it wasn't. But obviously, like you said earlier, you had some great tussles with Hans and Tony and people like that in the Grand Prix. Obviously, looking back, that was my childhood growing up, was watching you guys in the Grand Prix and things like that, and also in the British League. You know, there must have been good times for yourself, you know, rubbing handlebar to handlebar with these guys.
Yeah, it was. You know, you had to be professional. In hindsight, I think I could have done certain things a lot better, but of course that's hindsight. Everybody's faster with the aid of hindsight. But it was good fun. It was tough. I remember the very first Grand Prix at Wrocław. I was actually in Heat 1, and winning that race felt so good. You know, it was. I think Thomas was in it and Tony was in it. It wasn't exactly an easy race, and went on to have a good meeting. Probably could have won the first Grand Prix actually, but Hans, my nemesis, decided to I was the danger and nailed me to the fence and allowed, I think, Thomas or whoever it was up the inside. So it kind of wrecked his own final as well as mine.
Well, that was Hans in a nutshell, though. Really looking out for the main danger and blocking them, and then some whippersnapper or whoever would get the inside or go around them, sort of thing. But yeah, that was obviously good old days and everything like that. And obviously on to '97 again in the Grand Prix series, and still with Ipswich and everything. A different race format for the British League, though. He was down to 6 riders in the British League at that time, and that's when the Elite League started after the amalgamation of the Premier League the previous 2 seasons. So how did you feel going into that new season '97? Like less clubs, but like less riders in your team as well.
Yeah, '97, was that the year of the 6-lap last race? I can't remember.
No, that was '99. That was when Sky got involved, I think, because then Sky was
'99, was it? Okay,
yeah.
I do remember that. Didn't like that very much. It's amazing how 2 more laps, so just another 30 seconds or whatever it is, makes a big difference, especially when you do the 16-lapper every year. But
yeah, I was going to come on to that a bit later.
yeah, '97. To be honest, I think '98 was so much fun. I don't remember much about '97, to be honest. It wasn't until you just told me that we've done 6-man teams then that I thought '98 was the only year.
No, it wasn't, because I think the '98 was the year where you could have nominate riders, so you could put riders in and out. But '97,
that's right.
'97 was when you had like 6 rides guaranteed every night, sort of thing. I think it was, or something like that, you know. But obviously, again, on the international and the Grand Prix stages, you know, you unfortunately didn't quite make. I don't think you made the top 8 that year. You had to go to the Challenge, I think it was that year. I think, which was in Vienna Neustadt, which is a lovely, nice flat track for yourself to ride.
Yeah, another nightmare for me.
Yeah,
it was. I like the place, wonderful place, but yeah, the track wasn't the best for me. You froze again then for a moment.
Yeah, right, we're back now.
I love this technology.
Now. Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? But also in '97, there was a certain runoff that I've got footage of with a certain mate of yours.
No, I don't remember that.
I
don't remember that one.
I guess a certain Mark Laram, shall we say, for the British title. Of course, you finished runner-up in the '96 Joe Screen. Obviously, you get even closer this time in '97 to winning it, your first one. I mean, do you remember what you're sort of thinking and feeling at this sort of point?
Yeah, I want to desperate. As you could probably see in the race, we both wanted to win. The British finals were massive days. They really were big days at Coventry. You know, driving from Ipswich to Coventry with all the flags. I left some rubber on him there. He tells me. He gave me the cleaning bill for his suit the next day. You know, the drive there, you've got the Ipswich flags hanging out the windows and obviously other teams' flags hanging out the windows. You just sensed, even before you got to the stadium, that it was a special day. And it was. Everyone treated it as big as in them days as kind of for us as the world final felt almost. It was a massive day for us all.
Yeah, and of course, national title. Everyone wants to be British #1, you know, and things like that. But obviously, riding with Mark, it must have made it a bit special, because obviously you 2 great mates and everything, and you knew could ride
just until when he finished completely in a pile of dust up by the fence. Yeah, I was enjoying it till then.
I think he was trying to make sure he should have come through. Yeah, that's what it was.
He knew we'd got one more corner after that, and he wasn't going to give me a second chance. So
no, exactly.
But you know, I mean, you can see there the fans loved it. It was a very tough but fair race. Nothing but respect for each other, I think. You know, totally enjoyed it.
Yeah, exactly. Even though you came second, you know, that's the only thing.
Yeah, I made sure I didn't make any mistakes the next year.
No, that's true, because you managed to lift your first British title in '98, which again for yourself must have been a great achievement. You know, just to say that you are national champion at last.
Yeah, it was something, you know, a bit like the under-21s when I started. That was the first hurdle. You know, look, I've got a couple of years' chance at this. I want to be under-21 world champion, achieve that. And then really my next goal was at that point, I want to be British champion. Took a bit longer, you know, I had more success on the kind of world scene before managing to be British champion. And that's just how tough a lineup it was, how tough a meeting it was. It really was that tough on a big day. So, to do it. I said it kind of sort of be sharing it, and then it was sort of Mark, and then Mark, myself, and I think Screeny was getting involved in those days as well. So you know, they were fantastic days.
Yeah, Sunday afternoon at Coventry, couldn't beat it. And of course, a lot of it was on the old shape Coventry as well, and he managed to win one on the old shape and on the new shape. So it must have been. Was the Coventry shape any different to you? Did it affect you in any way?
I prefer the original shape. It was just better proportion. The corners were bigger. It was a better racetrack, I felt. I mean, when the newer shape was in good condition, surface-wise, then it was a good racetrack. But it just seemed to, for whatever reason, I don't really know what it was. I know stock cars played a part and stuff, but it always seemed to have problems with the surface after it was changed. It just was never consistent. And it wasn't quite, just the shape wasn't as much fun as the original track. So
yeah, also I think they must have competed with the FIM as well, because obviously then they had the Grand Prix there from 98 to 2000, so it must have been something to do with that as well. It might have been a culprit in it.
Yeah, maybe, but I think it was just the stadium usage at the time with cars and things just didn't help it.
Yeah, then obviously moving on to the greatest year probably in Ipswich's history is of 98. Where you managed to sign a certain young rookie Polish rider by the name of Thomas Golob. I think we must have been on a bargain average, because it was a first time in the British League and things like that. But how did that sort of come about? Do you know much about how the whole deal came about with getting Thomas to Ipswich?
To be honest, I don't really. I was just so focused on trying to win races at that point. I didn't really have anything to do with the club, like running of the club and stuff. I know a lot of it was to do with selling TV rights to Poland. I think it was Vizia TV at the time. They desperately wanted to have a Polish influence in the British League that they were buying to show in Poland. So they kind of brokered the deal, and that's how it came about. It was just great at the time that we were up that got him. It made a massive difference, particularly in the six-man team era. To have that one rider that much difference to his average was always going to play a big part.
Yeah, because I think he did the 16 lapper in '97. I think it would have been, because I think I've seen footage of him riding your equipment in that meeting, and that must.
He didn't like it very much. Done nothing moaned about it.
Yeah, because he didn't say Golob on it; it said Louis on it. That's what it was, really. It wasn't anything else. But no, I mean, just to see him riding on a British track must have been nice to see. And obviously then find out he's your teammate the following, and and then you've got Tony in the team, Tony Svar, Scott Nichols, who else do you have? Sal Clouting. It was a very, very strong, powerful team all the way through.
Yeah, we just sort of rubbed off on each other, really, because, through that year, we ended up with, I think, 1, 3 and 5 in the world. We ended up with the Polish champion, British champion, Swedish champion, Czech champion, I think British under-21 champion. Everyone had won something. So, it was just, they say success breeds success, and it went through that team. No one, right through the team at team level, when we were winning league matches, no one wanted to be the rider that let the team down, and we lost. I don't know how many we lost. I think we lost about 5 or 6 meetings in total that year. And when we left those tracks having lost, it was a big deal to us. We were devastated, and we'd all be analysing, well, was it me? Was it not? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? Yeah, that's how it just was. We arrived at tracks, put equipment into pits, and you could sense that the home riders were looking at you as if to sort of just almost defeated already. How many are we going to lose by? That's kind of how it felt. It was so nice to ride in a team that dominated like that. It's I had a little bit of that at Hackney in my first year, but that's the only other time that I've experienced that. It was great.
Also being number one, taking a bit of pressure off you, having the likes of Tony and Thomas in the team, just to sort of say, okay, I don't need to always be at my 100% riding all the time. The team don't depend on me, sort of thing. You can sort of relax and enjoy yourself, which obviously then gave you probably the confidence then to move forward and obviously then to keep pushing with the team.
Yeah, Mike's one of the team managers had the toughest job, because one of us was always going to get upset when we hadn't got heat 15. So, yeah, he probably had the toughest job of the lot, I think. He's just trying to share it out. But it did seem at home in particular that, Thompson and Tony might have had 12 and 11 each from their rides. I might have had 9. But if the pressure was still on last heat decided, for some reason, it was me that got the nod for heat 15. So then when you get 12 from your 4 rides and you don't get the nod, you're a bit upset.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're on a maximum, it doesn't really matter, because you want to keep your maximum more than anything.
No, I never thought like that. Wanted another ride. Didn't matter how I'd done.
Always as good as your last ride. That's the great mentality to have.
Yeah. Got to have that extra ride. It's point being prizes.
Yeah, exactly. Because obviously in '98, that's when we had all the team suits as well, and all the helmet colours and all that sort of thing. It's I mean, I've got one of the old Eastbourne suits, I think it was the Mark II one I've got, and I'd never realised how sort of thin those suits were. They were sort of like really, really thin. I mean, I know the likes of yourself and Dan Eastbourne, Martin and Dave Norris had their own sort of tailor-made suits, but the original sort of, I would say, cycle suits were really, really thin.
Yeah, they were. I think they were a Simon Wigg thing. He kind of brought them. I mean, Simon's an innovator in his grass track and speedway days, long track days. He was always looking to be different, but he was different for a reason. He was only different because he felt it was going to give him the edge. So yeah, they were. But that '98 team at Ipswich, ones that started proper team suits. It was the first time in many years. I mean, I think you can go back to early days of Mildenhall. They had team suits, and that's going back into the '70s. So, but we were the first ones to do it in the latter era, and thankfully they've pretty much stayed in, certainly at the top end anyway, in the top league ever since then, because it definitely gives it a more professional look about it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously, like everyone can identify each rider and things like that, or each team, sorry, and things like that. And obviously, then it's just easy to pick out the rider then. But then obviously, after the glorious year of 1998, you had to unfortunately disperse the team in '99 back to a 7-man team. You lost Tony, but kept Thomas. So, how was that sort of year in '99 like? Did you enjoy it? Was it a good year for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to be tough to follow '98. When you're doing that, it's much more fun. '99 was good. Thomas, strange character to ride with. To be honest, he very much kept himself to himself. He never trusted anything you were telling him. So it wasn't the easiest. I mean, we got along, and I have so much for him, but. Yeah, it was a very much racing mentality and relationship. It was very, very difficult to be best of buddies with Thomas. On the other hand, Tony was someone that you could go to a party with and have fun and have a couple of drinks with, and he would sort of relax people. But Thomas couldn't do that.
No, I suppose also he didn't speak much English at the time and things like that, so it must have been hard to communicate with him.
Selective English at the time. Yeah, I think he understood a lot of English. He didn't always choose to use it, but no, I mean, I had a lot of respect for him as a rider. He was frustrating actually, because he could do things on a speedway bike that people could only dream of, and you'd watch him. Even as a rider, you'd look at him and go, "How on earth does he do that?" Especially when you know what his bike's set up, how it is, and you just think, I'd be struggling just to get round riding that thing, and he's just stopping it on a sixpence and turning back and doing stuff, and you're like, I don't know how that works.
I mean, it's that classic race with him and Jimmy Nielsen from that year when he dives underneath him at the very last corner, the smallest gap in the world you could ever see, and he's still got round him and past him in the line. You think,
he still manages to get the bike going again. He had virtually no teeth on the back wheel. That thing had no right to be able to get up and go again, but he made it work.
But yeah, it just proves the skill of the guy at the end of the day. He did have a lot of talent and things like that. But looking at your own personal year of '99, you managed to almost win the British Grand Prix by coming second. So you came close to winning a Grand Prix. I mean, it must have been a good steady year for you in the Grand Prix that year.
Yeah. I think I had a couple of podiums. Frustrating, one of my frustrations, I wouldn't say regrets, because I don't regret anything in sport. Just frustrated never to have won one. Certainly could have done and should have done. So that's probably my biggest frustration in Speedway, is not actually winning Grand Prix rounds.
Yeah, but like I say, he came close on a couple of occasions, one being at Coventry. I think a couple were maybe in '98 or '97 where you came close, and I think it was Denmark was one round you came close to winning. But obviously by then the Grand Prix format had changed to the knockout system, which how did you find it? Did you enjoy that system? Would you prefer the five qualifying races in the semi-final and the final sort of thing?
what are you asking? If I enjoyed the knockout rounds where you kind of had
did you enjoy those rounds?
2 rides or whatever? No, along with probably 15 other riders in the field, I hated it. It was the one, I would say, the one big mistake that they've made in terms of the Grand Prix was bringing that format in. It was very different, and I guess it was worth a try. But from a rider's point, it was a disaster. It was horrible.
Yeah, especially if you're consistently going out after your second ride. You turned up, you're going to do maybe 2 rides, if you're lucky, a third ride, to then go home. And after having a Friday of all-day practice and getting everything ready, you're going home after 2 rides. Yeah,
you just couldn't afford that to happen, and you had no way of recovering from it. It wasn't a format. Expect to spend the amount of time in places across Europe and then give them 2 rides. It just didn't sit well with anybody.
Yeah, but then obviously after 99, you managed to stay in the Grand Prix, no more GP Challenge, which was good. And then onto the Millennium Year of 2000. And of course, that's when sort of BSI was starting to step in. And that's when the air fence and everything all came in. What was your first impression of seeing an air fence at a Grand Prix meeting?
I think along with everybody, we could see it was a massive step forward in people. It was strange because people had the opinion that we would take more risk riders when the air fences came, but it certainly, I can speak for myself, it never made any difference to the road. I didn't want to crash whatever I was hit, to be perfectly honest. So no, I don't think it did, but it certainly kept us safe. That's sure. I mean, you've seen so many people walk away from some big crashes that they simply wouldn't have done pre-air fence days. I mean, the mistake of having on the straights for the first, I don't think it even lasted all year, but for the first few meetings at least, that was, again, a mistake. Don't know until you try it.
Yeah, I think the air fences down the straights soon went off. They did the World Team Cup in 2001 when they had the 6 riders, and then they didn't take the air fences out for the race off, and then everyone kept catching their footrests at the bottom of the air fence. But in 2000, obviously, again, it was a good year for yourself. I think you managed to get on the rostrum in Prague. I think it was 3rd place. I think you got in the opening round of the Grand Prix, which must have, for yourself, thought, oh, this is going to be my year sort of thing. It start snowballing now.
And then all the injuries began. So it soon started. I seem to remember that the start of that year was pretty good. You've got all the information there. I can't remember it.
Well, I'm not too sure about the injury front, but I know that you had a good year because, again, you managed to win the British final that year, your second time winning it in the wet of Coventry. Unfortunately,
people said I couldn't. People said I couldn't ride in the rain, but I actually enjoyed that meeting.
Yeah, obviously you did because you came out on top. That's the best thing to do. Come out on top in the worst conditions and enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it was good. One of those meetings where halfway through the meeting you had that wet, slippery surface on the inside, and then you just rode into this berm that just railed you around the corner. You just had to make your staying more than anything. But thankfully I was making good steps. And it all just went well for me. It was great to win that one, particularly Max. Just you can do it again. Winning something once is great, but to do it again just seems satisfying for some reason.
Yeah, and especially like you say, you do it on a 15-point maximum. You can't do it any better than that, really. The maxing out, but then obviously
that was not.
Yeah, exactly. But then obviously with the Grand Prix again, solid all the way through. I think you've managed to finish in the top 10 or top 8 or whatever it was back then. I can't remember what the cutoff was at that sort of time. But you also did the World Team Cup at Coventry, which again, Great Britain came close to winning. Unfortunately, a holy track, shall we say, at Coventry that afternoon cost the runoff with Mark and everything. But I think remember in heat number 1, you kind of got ran up the fence a little bit, where you just and you still managed to get 3rd place.
I can't remember.
I think it was. I think you're out in heat number 1 or something like that, was your second or something like that. And I think it was Crumpy and someone else decided to run you up the fence down the back straight, and you almost end up on the infield or the concrete infield at Coventry. And you managed to get 3rd place. I think another bloke retired at the end of it. So
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's World Championship Speedway. They're not going to give you any room, are they? Particularly Jason. It was tough in them days.
Well, yeah,
I hope he's retained that toughness.
you'll find out when he comes back to Ipswich.
He
But
better have done.
yeah, he better have done, exactly. But obviously, then, like you said, the injuries started going in 2000 and 2001. Because obviously, when I was looking into for this chat and everything, 2001 was a year where you had the first two rounds of the Grand Prix at Berlin and at Cardiff, which I can imagine for yourself at Cardiff must have been a huge thing.
Yeah, Cardiff was massive. I mean, I remember being in the pits at Coventry when announced we'd be in the Grand Prix at Cardiff Stadium, and it was a wow factor. I know everyone around them was saying, "What an event!" And to be honest, in recent times, it's been the best thing for Speedway. It is the grand event of World Championship Grand Prix Speedway. Everybody wants to ride in a Cardiff Grand Prix. Yeah, it worked fantastically, and from an atmosphere point of view, walking those out pits or driving out in whatever the various different ways we've done the parade over the years, and being introduced on that infield to that crowd. No one could not feel it and have their hairs in the back of their neck stand up when in that atmosphere. It's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a one-off experience, that sort of thing. Like I said, unfortunately, 2001 was a very injury-hit year for yourself. I think you missed in the round 3 due to injury. What was the injuries you managed to pick up that year? Because I was only a kid then, I can't really remember.
A massive bang on the Poland when the start pole got left in the track. I think it was in front of me, racing with who was it? I think, and the pole came up. He hit it, came up, and I was just behind him, and it hit him in the head and knocked me to passenger at about 80 mile an hour at Chester Hover. And just sort of rode into the fence at the end of the straight. So I was out cold for a few days. Had an operation and managed to get myself back in the van out this fly. So fortunately, my driver at the time had stayed in Poland, waited for that he drove back. We drove back via had dinner with the Team GB who were riding in the World Cup that weekend. I remember saying afterwards he wished I hadn't done that because I was dribbling and not in a very good state. So I think it put him off a bit for his World Cup meeting. But that was a particularly bad.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've lost Chris for the evening because his internet connection has gone down, unfortunately, so it seems. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. We're going to do a part 2 to this, definitely, because I'm sure Chris has got a lot more to say, and I've got a few more things to show him, really. But hopefully you've enjoyed tonight of what we've been able to bring you tonight. Fingers crossed that in the future we can arrange this and get a part 2 out. But I must say to everyone, please go and like and subscribe to all the group pages and everything. Follow us on YouTube, follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And not long to hopefully our next episode come out. But hopefully you've enjoyed this one. I know it's been a bit of a mix mash, but hopefully part 2 will be along very, very soon.